my mother and my father had a very small business to survive. So I had small and a very little experience on helping out my mother. Indonesia, if you think about it, is actually has the largest potential for aquaculture because we are already the second largest, just below China. But if we see in terms of the coastal line, Indonesia has the second longest coastal line after Canada.
So take us back to the moment you decided to start eFishery. What was it like when you decided to say, okay, I'm going to start this company and this is how I'm going to build it going forward?
So when I started eFishery, I didn't have any plan to start eFishery when I was graduated in 2012. And from that discussion, I impulsively pitched an idea to him. Hey, what if I can build a machine that you can feed your fish to your smartphone and you can control it? And we're currently the largest feed distributor and also the largest financier.
Welcome back, everybody. Super excited to be joined by Gibran. And Gibran, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to join you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Can you tell me a bit about your upbringing? Where did you grow up and how did your upbringing look like?
Well, I grew up in Jakarta. I was born and raised in Jakarta. It's a big city here in Indonesia. But I grew up from a very humble family. So it's nearby the slum area, at least. So coming from that background. And I spent my childhood all in Jakarta. I moved to Bekasi and then I studied in top tech university in Bandung. But because I struggled throughout my childhood, my mother and my father had a very small business to survive. So I had small and a very little experience on helping out my mother on her small rice store, rice vendors that's selling it in the wet market. So I grew up in that area that is very entrepreneurial but very humble, and I learned a lot from my experience in my childhood.
What would you say early on was your biggest passion? Did you have any specific passions you wanted to pursue growing up at an early age?
Well, the early age, not in particular, but I always liked to learn. So I remember when my mother described me as my childhood, I was quite a quirky one because all of the other kids they play around outside, but I read newspapers and I was 4 years old, just enjoying what was there in newspaper. I didn't understand what was there, but I enjoy grasping new information. And at some time I woke up at 1 a.m. and then opening my books and just getting done with the task, even there was no homework at all. So I always enjoyed working. I aspired to be a doctor, as most of the kids back then, right? But I realized that I had no talent to be a doctor. But later in the college, when I actually found out my passion, and it shaped me to be the way I am right now.
Can you tell me a bit about how you ended up studying biology? Because I think you said it was a bit of an accident how you ended up. You sort of wanted to take it because you would get a good grade on it. What was that story about?
Well, particularly for the biology, it was not an accident. For aquaculture, it was an accident. So we can share a story later on. But particularly for the biology, I was quite fascinated about the biology. But I really like biology. But my high school teacher was very inspiring about it. And he told me when he told me a story and then the theory about what happens on the photosynthesis, which is very complex processes, right? And then he elaborated that, wait, that's what happens on every cells in every mitochondria. And then you can imagine there's a lot of chlorophylls or each of the leaf. And then if you see how many trees are there, then that's a miracle. So that's the magic of life. And you can learn so much from life that you can implement to your own and get the wisdom from that. So I was always, a philosophical one, and I found it very philosophical and very inspiring. And that's what got me to be a biologist. I actually had two interests back then, either going to the computer science, which maybe I should have done it, or go to biology. But I enjoy nature more because in biology I know that I would go to the mountains and go to the oceans. That's what I was excited for, and I decided to join biology. And the aquaculture story, then we can do it really soon right now. But that's the accident.
Yeah, but so at this time, I guess you also started to have a farming project on the side, farming catfish. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So that came from the accident part of getting the aquaculture. So my focus in biology is getting a minor in ecology, particularly terrestrial ecology. So it has nothing to do with aquaculture. But there's one optional class in aquaculture. It's only 3 credits, and it's very famous class throughout the university because everyone can get in the class, and it's called package A. So as long as you're there, you sit there, and then you present, and then you'll be guaranteed to get an A. And that was the only reason why I got in aquaculture class. But it was so crowded of a class. But again, the professor was so inspiring and so passionate about aquaculture, and convinced me enough that the future of aquaculture is on the future of food is on aquaculture, and particularly told me a story about how catfish sector in Vietnam has been very growing, right? But particularly the pangasius. And pangasius was growing very fast. And then pangasius and all of the whole catfish is very famous in Indonesia. But Vietnam produced it, but they tried to export it to US and Europe, and they couldn't export it at the very beginning because there was channel catfish in the US. And then my professor mentioned that they rebranded it. They fillet it and rebranded it as a dory fish, and it was now one of the back then one of the highest consumption for freshwater fish in the US and Europe, and it was so exciting. And what it told me after that, then, hey, Indonesia, you see that catfish is very low level. It's only small food vendors buying it, so it's a cheap fish. But you'll see over the next 5 to 10 years, catfish will also go into the upper class. It definitely will be there. So it's up to you whether you want to be part of it, the catfish revolutions. And that, it was so inspiring. It really got to my heart. Exactly after that class, I opened my own catfish farm. I rented out one pond, which is very, very cheap to rent one pond in Indonesia. And then, it got me to then had catfish farming business as a side business back then when I was in college. I think it was 2nd or 3rd year in college.
How long are the cycles on the catfish? Like from you start producing it, from you can sell it, right?
It's around 2 to 3 months. It's a pretty quick.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. We need to talk a bit about aquaculture in Indonesia, because obviously I'm from Norway, so I have great exposure to the salmon industry, of course. But Indonesia is such a huge country for aquaculture, like the 2nd largest, I guess, in production. So how would you summarize the potential or the current state of the aquaculture industry, but also maybe as interesting, the enormous potential for growing the aquaculture industry in Indonesia?
Yeah, and that I think what got me in aquaculture. I mean, definitely the accident was there, but what made me stick to the aquaculture is because the massive opportunity of the sector itself. Because Indonesia, as you mentioned, is already the 2nd largest aquaculture producers. I think in terms of the value of the market, it's a $10 billion market already. So it's a huge numbers. And we have 3.5 million of fish farmers in Indonesia. So a lot of fish farmers with more than 20 million of fish ponds. So can you imagine a lot of fish ponds? So if you go to any rural areas, unlike salmon farming, there is no way that is very advanced, very highly consolidated, large scale. Indonesia it's a backyard farming. It's all across the country and everywhere. So I think the fragmentation of the market is challenging for the market to grow by itself, but it's also a big opportunity because if we can provide some consolidation to that market, then we can create a really strong and sustainable growth on top of the market itself. But the other thing that I was very keen about the sector and what made me stay is the fact that Indonesia, if you think about it, actually has the largest potential for aquaculture because we already the 2nd largest. Right? just below China. But if we see in terms of the coastal line, Indonesia has the second longest coastal line after Canada. But Canada's coastal line is not as fertile as Indonesia, because in Indonesia, in any coastal line, you can farm a fish or farm a shrimp, essentially, because it's so fertile. So we technically has this longest fertile coastal line for aquaculture. So that's one. And the second, if you see the big aquaculture countries like India and China, they produce a lot of fish, but only in certain region, which is on the subtropical one, on the southern part of it, because the rest of the country is a four seasons. In Indonesia, you can farm a fish all year round and farm shrimp all year round, which means that if you're utilizing all of the potential that we have, we can be the largest aquaculture country in the world. And that's the fact. And I read a study that we're only utilizing 7 to 8% of the total aquaculture potential, which means that we can grow 10 times in there. So there will only be an upside of aquaculture market in Indonesia. And of course, aquaculture itself is the fastest growing sector right now. So combination of the sector of aquaculture and Indonesia is the aquaculture market, and then the tech part of it, then it's all upside for if we combine it in one strategy. And that's also one of the few reasons why I started eFishery.
Yeah, super interesting. Just one final question on the aquaculture summary. So what are the biggest species farmed, and do you think that will change, or is like the biggest species now shrimp and some types of fish is going to beat out all the way around, or is it a development in what people tend to farm?
Yeah, in terms of the volume right now, people farm tilapia, catfish, and carp as the top three commodities by volume. But it's consumed domestically and it's a low value products. But that's why by value, it's actually shrimp that is up there. But in total, shrimp is only taking, I think, 10-15% of total volume, but contributing to close to 30% of total value, and currently the largest export contribution for the whole seafood, not just in aquaculture. But yeah, and in terms of how the market will change, I think if we see how China is evolving on their consumption behavior, initially they really consume a lot of tilapia, but right now they're already net importer of seafood because they're eating a lot of salmon, eating a lot of Pacific lobster, because the economy and their purchasing power is increased. And we can expect pretty much the same. I think we can either shift from low value products to high value products because the changing behavior of the local consumption, or the involvement for us in the global trade market. So I think over the next, I'm talking about the long term right now, like 10, 20 years, we will see more farming in barramundi, grouper, and other high value tropical fish compared to tilapia, pangasius, and carp, the way that it is right now, that is consumed domestically and low value.
Got it. So take us back to the moment you decided to start eFishery. Obviously, we talked a bit about your background, your studying, and this enormous opportunity. But what was it like when you decided to say, okay, I'm going to start this company and this is how I'm going to build it going forward?
Yeah. So when I started eFishery, I didn't have any plan to start eFishery. When I was graduated in 2012, I own and operate 76 catfish farms, which is not bad, but not good at all. But I dreamed to have 1,000 ponds by myself. So I tried to learn from from many fish farmers that had more experience than me. From that discussion with that fish farmers, and I remember vividly that one fish farmer that I met already owned 1,000 ponds and operate 1,000 ponds. Then I asked to him about what was currently his biggest problems and biggest challenge. And he mentioned that the biggest problem is on the feeding cost, because the feed cost is 70 to 90% of the total cost, and it's done manually by labor. And because he owned 1,000 ponds, it's not standardized at all. Some labor is really disciplined, but the other labor is too lazy or even too passionate and overfeeding the fish. And sometimes the other laborers kill the feed and sell it to the other farm. So there's no standard on providing the feed itself. And from that discussion, I impulsively pitched an idea to him. Hey, what if I can build a machine that you can feed your fish to your smartphone and you can control it? It's a very impulsive idea, and he was so excited. And then his response after that convinced me to at least try it out. He said that, hey, if your product can actually effective, then all of my pond will use your technology. And I remember, well, he has 1,000 pond. That's a lot, and it's coming from one farmer. And back from that discussion, I tried to calculate how many ponds are actually in Indonesia, and it's massive. It's tens of millions of ponds. And no one is doing it at all, because when I try to do my own research, salmon farming has their own technology, but definitely not applied in Indonesia and not applied for small scale fish farming. So I took an inspiration from that and to figure out whether I can build some technology for small scale fish farming in Indonesia and the other region as well, because the market is there, no one is doing it. So then I started doing a prototype and built a very scrappy prototype for the first 2 to 3 months and built it by myself. It was an SMS-based feeding machine. So then that's when I built the first prototype, and then I brought to many farmers, and then many farmers were very excited about it. And well, this is exciting. I want to order it. And then when I had enough order, then I had the whole conviction. Okay, I think I should start it. But the other interesting part of it, and when I want to start it, I live on the same dorm with a friend of mine, which already started an e-commerce company, and it was pretty small. He closed a seed round and want to raise a Series A round back then, because 10 years ago it was so early for the tech scene in Indonesia. Right now, his company is already unicorn and already IPO. So it's a very famous company here in Indonesia called Bukalapak. But we were very small and we live on the same road. And then I asked about his insight. Hey, I want to start this business. What do you think? And he tried to convince me to start my own e-commerce company, but I'm not interested in e-commerce. I'm interested in this. What do you think? Hey, maybe you can think about how to put an internet for your device and then build an internet business on top of it. Then I learned a lot about internet business, and that came, the eFishery part of it. Like the initially it was eFishery, like iPhone, but I want to make it different. That's why I created eFishery, because it's more like electronics part of it, like email. So yeah, and that's I brainstormed to figure out whether I can build an internet business for fish farming, but started off from a device, which is an IoT, the Internet of Things for that. And the rest is history. We started building the first prototype and then creating a new business model, and then built like a true end-to-end ecosystem right now.
Yeah, I guess when you started this project, it was important to make it affordable, right? Because that has to be a very important factor to selling it. So how was it to create something that created value, but at the same time was affordable enough that you get the farmers on? I guess that's what's the challenge.
Exactly. That's really good questions, because for automatic feeding solutions, it was not the first one. And when I did my own research, and some are building maybe a better technology, but with the price point like $5,000 and $6,000 per unit, and for that price point, no farmers would buy it at all. So I tried to figure out whether I think the basic, if I would like to build the technology, it needs to be radically affordable, so small scale farmers to use it. So I tried to not offer engineering any product and solutions that I built. That's why the first prototype is very scrappy. I use a secondhand plastic drum that the farmers usually use, and aluminum. Then I create a very simple sensors using vibration-based sensors instead of hydrophone sensors that might be more expensive. Then initially we didn't even have a smartphone. I used a small calculator and doing that. And the other expensive part is the connectivity. I mean, a lot of existing players using radio frequency, which is expensive. Then you need to set up and a computer is also expensive. Then I tried to strip it down by creating a connectivity through SMS gateway. and then later build it to a peer-to-peer Wi-Fi that connected directly to the smartphone. So I think try to rebuild it from what the farmers really need and what's actually not needed, and we can change it and find a cheaper alternative. So that's one that we can do that. So when we launched it, the price point was only like $500, $600 per unit compared to $5,000 and $6,000 that is widely available back then. But that's one thing, right? But the second thing is not just changing our approach on the product, but our approach on the business model. So when we tried it out, it's still a bit more expensive to the farmers. Particularly, they're not willing to pay for $500, $600 for a product that they've never used before. And they've been doing it for decades, right? For 10, 20 years. And it's hard to change their mindset. So we had a business model in 2015 that we launched. We call it feeding as a service. So it's a feeding as a service model. They don't need to pay for the device. It's like a rental model. So they pay around $30, $20 or something per month to use this product, and that's radically affordable for them. And that's how we get a lot of users coming in, because the product and also the business model that the pricing model that we offer to them is radically affordable.
And another interesting part, I guess, for the people to know is the return on investment they get, because obviously before this, it was very, very labor intensive. You maybe didn't use the resources as efficiently as you could, right? So I think you have spoken on it before, but the return on the investment for farmers gives them more opportunity to grow in a sustainable way and also scale their businesses, which is super great, right?
Right.
In case of where we're going right now, I think what's interesting, I think there is like a saying that in Asia, they're more good at building sort of these super apps which cover all types of verticals. And I think when you're speaking about the vision for eFishery, it's basically to create a super solution for everything you need, from feed to financing, etc. Can you explain what the dream scenario is for eFishery right now and how you want to be like the number one stop for everything a farmer needs in their life?
I think at the very early stage of our company, it has been our dream. So when we build a roadmap about the product, there are 3 layers of it. So the first layer is on the device, just get a lot of devices deployed. And the second part is capture the data. From the device, we can get a lot of data and add more data that we can capture. And the third part is marketplace. So we didn't know what we would do back then, but that has been the vision. However, to build an end-to-end solutions, we needed density. That's why we waited for 6 years. I think we started in 2013, and then we just did a pilot for the end-to-end solutions in 2019, because that's when we have viable density. And it's also the reason why, like many IoT devices are trying to be a multi-countries company, right? They're selling in 20 countries, in 5 countries, and 10 countries. But if you're really only focusing in Asia, because we know that we don't want to be like a device business. It's not a hardware business, but it's actually an ecosystem business that needs density. So that's how we focus on crack to capture the volume. So when we have thousands and tens of thousands of ponds using it and devices deployed, then we started building it in 2019. The way that we started, I think it's quite no-brainer, because it's a feeding machine. We know how many feed that they're using, and the farmers also inform us through the app what brand of feed that they're using and what SKUs. And then we started selling feed to the farmers. But it's not just like a pure marketplace that we trade. We trade the feed to the farmers, but we need to create a certain efficiency to the supply chain. And the way that we do it right now is usually small scale farmers, they buy to the feed retail side. So the feed stores, feed dealers in the retail price, because they only have small scale, small quantity. What we're doing is we aggregate, let's say 1,000 ton using X brand of feed. And instead of them buying to the feed dealers, we will have a aggregated volume bulk, and we will purchase directly to the feed manufacturers. And the best thing of it, that we can ship it on the day that the farmers need it. because we know all of the data, so we can ship it on demand. So we are like a feed distributor, but without owning any inventory, because we can have the data and build it in a just-in-time on-demand model. So that's one when we started doing it, and we scaled it out pretty quickly in 2019. And when we did sell the feed to the farmers, a lot of farmers asked whether they can buy the feed on credit and pay after harvest, which is quite common practice here in Indonesia. You get the feed and pay after harvest after you sell the fish. But we didn't want to do it by ourselves because we didn't have enough capital to do so. But we tried to figure out, hey, can we solve it? Do we have the data to solve it? And then we have actually the data. We have the harvest data, we have the feed data, all the data information. Then we built some sort of like credit scoring on top of the data, that we work with the financial institutions so that the financial institution can provide some sort of like BNPL model for the farmers to buy the feed on credit. And then we create this as a whole ecosystem that we call eFishery Mall. So that's an input marketplace that the farmers can buy everything on credit with the financing. But it's not just about the marketplace and ecosystem, but it started by having the data from them. And then that's when we focus on the input. After that, we did the same thing, but for the output, because we know when they will harvest the fish and how much, because we know the feed and we know the FCR. We can predict, the stock density and stuff. We can roughly predict. I think they will harvest in a month in 2 tons, and we did by pre-sell their fish before it's even harvested. So let's say one pond will harvest 3 tons of fish over the next 3 weeks. Today we will put it in our marketplace. Then the buyers can pre-purchase it before it's even harvested. Then we can get buyers to reach 3 tons of quota. Then we harvest from the farmers. So yeah, end-to-end ecosystem has been there, but the use cases came because we tried to solve what are the farmers' problems right now. And currently, it's not just a dream, because it has been built as an end-to-end ecosystem right now. eFishery currently managing like 240,000 ponds right now in Indonesia, and we're currently the largest feed distributor in Indonesia, and also the largest financier, and also the biggest fish supplier without owning and operating any single pond. And that's kind of the model and the dream for us to build it.
Super impressive. Well, what has been your biggest lessons after funding this company? How was it easy to get fundraising in the aquaculture space, or was it a challenge to get the right investors on board?
Well, it was definitely a challenge not to get the right investor on board, to get any investor on board. I think like we started very early in 2013, and particularly in Indonesia, it was just the beginning of all of the tech investments coming in. So they invested a lot in e-commerce, invested in fintech, invested in ride-hailing, and those type of companies absorb many capital from the consumer side of it. But and when we started building it and pitched to the investors, I mean, I don't see any reason why investors want to invest in us, because if you are investors, among other consumer tech, e-commerce company, ride-hailing company that has some other comparables and benchmark in the other market, this small aquaculture technology company that is building a hardware solution for people in the rural area is definitely not so appealing. So they don't get about the sector at all, and they know that we have a hardware component, which is a risk and more capital intensive. And third, that we're selling to the rural area that needs a lot of growth, and also a lot of education, that you can just hack it and get a short-term growth on your top line and revenue, compared to if you just invest in a pure consumer company. So we had a really hard time to convince any investors. I can say that 99.9% investors that I pitched to rejected us. And hey, I don't believe in your sector. We don't invest in traditional. We don't invest in hardware. All of reasons, but I think it's not convincing, and I can understand their point of view. So we were lucky enough that through some luck that we were connected with Aquaspark, that the only company that understand about how the aquaculture is really a lucrative sector. And simply because of that thesis, they wanted to invest in us. And then we had one other local investors to invest in us in the seed round because EcoSpark was there. And same with the Series A, we were struggling to raise the Series A because it took us 3+ years to build the strong growth because it was compared to software companies that can build it really strong growth in 1 year, then it was not so appealing. But EcoSpark again led the round, and then we can convince some of the local tech thesis investors to build it. Only after Series B and the Series C that we raised, that finally we get more appealing because when we started to hardware, no one believed in the hardware and the IoT part of it. And then when I dream about, hey, this hardware can actually capture the data and then the data can build a marketplace, it's all hypothetical and they don't invest in hypothetical business that is too risky for them. But once we built this in the Series B, we already established an end-to-end ecosystem. But finally, we speak their languages. So the input marketplace is the e-commerce part of it. Like the Alpha marketplace is a group buying social commerce part of it. And then the financing is a fintech part of it. So we speak their language, and they can see that what we invested to build the foundation over the first 6 years can actually bring a very strong unit economics and very, very strong growth afterwards. And they see the growth, and finally, right now we're in a much better position in the market in terms of the fundraising processes. And I think it's also changed the perception on the market, and hopefully eFishery contribute small part of it, because we can see like the traditional thesis, tech thesis that only invest in the consumers right now. If we ask them what their focus, they put aquaculture in one of the key sectors that they would like to invest in the region, which I think is a massive improvement compared to 9 years ago when we started.
Definitely. I read a Twitter thread you made after securing a round, and you said that people need to dare to be contrarian and not just copy other ideas and expand them, to their own country. And maybe that's a big lesson. I mean, obviously it's been a super hard journey, but I mean, that's the reward you get afterwards. If you dare to be contrarian and maybe scale a local problem, it can be super rewarding if you just manage to get through it. And maybe more people should also view it in that way, and not just copy an idea in another country and take it to their own country.
Yep, hopefully.
Definitely. Okay, so just some final questions. I mean, so can you tell me about what do you think has been your hardest personal challenge on this journey? Has it been to scaling the team? Has it been the funding side? Where do you think you have faced the most challenges for yourself as a founder?
I think depending on the on the stage of the company, but so far, if you ask me what is the hardest part of it, is on the two problems at all. The first problem is on convincing the farmers. That was so hard because, as you see on the farmers, if we pitch the farmers, we're especially back then when we were simply an IoT company, right? We built a cloud-based, mobile-based IoT solution for smallholder farmers that don't have any mobile phone, and they didn't know cloud. The cloud is something in the sky, so they really what's this? And they've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, doing traditional way. So it was so hard for us to convince it. That's why on the early part of our journey, we struggled to get an adoption. I think many similar aquaculture agency company also face the same problems and same challenges. But it was also the biggest learning for me, because the way that we build it is not just refining the technology and refining the pitch, but actually refining the way that we build the community. Because my biggest epiphany is the first 10 customers. I was the salesperson myself, so I brought this feeder on the back of my motorbike, and then I go to pond by pond every day on the daily basis until finally, after 6 months, I got an order from one of them. So it was not as easy as I thought it would be. But the first 10 customers that wanted to use our product told me that I asked the reason, hey, why do you want to use it? Just to get a sense about why they use it. And it's not about the technology, the benefit, or all of the stuff. every one of them told the same answer, which is, I pity Gibran. I want to help you. You're now my friend. So it's all about very community, and that's I think the thing that people keep missing is to build a business, not just building a business and growing the numbers and build the technology. You really need to educate your farmers and really building community in order for this to create an impact. You need to show the impact, and that what then the foundation of the company, and for us to now strive to the way that we are right now, because we need to build and take part of it and educate the farmers slowly for them to be convinced enough to use this technology. So that's one. And the second is definitely on the fundraising part, and particularly the problem is not on the fundraising end, because it was so hard. The rejection is really hard, and getting to your heart if you do it in the like repetitively, and you question yourself whether you're on the right ideas and you made the right decision or not. But I think after a while, especially in the very beginning, when you run out of cash, that's a crisis, an existential crisis for the company. We actually reached to a certain point that we only had like 7 to 8 employees at that, but we really ran out of money, and the founders decided not to take a salary at all, and then keep doing it for 9 months, and then we living off a credit card, and then we need to sell everything, every asset that we had until it reached to zero, and until it reached a certain point, then I didn't have any money. The company had no money at all. Then I told to my employees that, hey, I can pay you this month, but if you still believe in eFishery, I will assure that the money will come next month. So please stay with eFishery and come back again next month. Then surprisingly, the day after they came back, and then they worked normally, and then they didn't get paid at all on that month, which I'm surprised. But going through that process, I mean, fortunately, of course, obviously that eFishery is still there. Fortunately, the month after we close the funding round, and then we get a big projects, and then the rest is history. But getting through that process is also the hard part of it. But of course, same with the consumers, the farmers acquisition, that we get the strong learnings. From this point of view, I also get the strong learnings. 6 months after that, I asked my employees about why they decided to stay, because it was not a good decision for them to stay, right? Whether don't they have any better option? But they actually had a better option. So some of them received an offer twice of their salary. Some of them received like 3 times of their salary on their work to the other company. And I remember also one of this very funny story that my employee had a long-term relationship with his fiancée back then. And the father of his fiancée mentioned that, hey, you work in this company. What company is this? I think if you would like to marry my daughter, you have to move and then work in the proper company. And his fiancée said that, hey, if you would like to work to marry me, leave eFishery and then choose between eFishery and myself. And he chose eFishery, which is so funny. Why he chose eFishery? Why were you? I wouldn't choose eFishery at all. But the type of sacrifice that they made is massive. And I asked, so why do you guys stay? And they said that because I believe in eFishery and the potential impact that we can do. If I work in the other company, it's just another company. But if I work in eFishery, then I can say if eFishery has deployed 1 million units to 1 million tons, they can proudly say, hey, that's my baby. I built it from scratch. And that's creating impact to many farmers. And that's what touched me. And then that's also, I created as a foundation of building the company. The mission needs to be there. The impact needs to be there. Everyone needs to understand that this is what we want to do. It's not just building products and building a company. We want to change something. We want to build something. We want to create a better livelihood for a lot of people. And that's the way that we shape the company that came from the hardest, the lowest point of our company in my life as well.
That is fantastic stories. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just the last question, Gibran. If you look at the future, what is your dream going forward the next few years? And also maybe tie it into how important you think aquaculture is in the general food puzzle, because obviously aquaculture is a very sustainable way to secure that people get enough food on their plates.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the next foreseeable future, we think that aquaculture will play a pivotal role in that, because for one thing, right, I think the major protein source right now, aquaculture is fish is probably the only remaining ones that is still wild captured, because beef, chicken, and the other like rice or bread and all of the fish that we eat on our plate is all farmed. It's no longer wild captured, but fish is still probably close to 50% wild captured. And if humanity ever shows us anything, we will move from hunter to farmer. So there will only be upside in aquaculture. It's still that it will play a big role on that. And of course, I think you're still familiar. You're very familiar with all of the story that this is a sustainable way to do that. But I think the way that aquaculture needs to be approached, because it's structured on the landscape that it is right now, it can't be designed as a particularly integrated business, particularly for the tropical part of it, because I can't see that like shrimp farming and fish farming, especially in the part of Asia, is a consolidated the way that salmon farming or poultry industry shape, because it won't be either sustainable and won't be feasible operationally. So any technology solutions in the company that can consolidate the market without replacing the smallholder, small-scale farmers would win the market, and that's what I believe in. So I think over foreseeable futures, you can see the small-scale farmers not replaced by the big, large companies that create a vertically integrated business, but they will then be equipped by ecosystem players that they can grow their livelihood and grow their scale in order to do that. So that's the second part of it. And the third, I think it's more like a longer term. In Indonesia, a lot of farming is still land-based farming. But I think over the next 20, 30, 50 years, we can see more offshore farming and in a high value product and more capital intensive, the way that it is in salmon industry. So I believe that it will go through that way, because that's the most sustainable and feasible way for us to produce seafood. And I think the last part is on the sustainable part of it. I think it's necessary not just as a additional like premium or jargon that the sustainability is important, but I think it's a necessary at some point that every fish farming and shrimp farming needs to be sustainable, and any technology, any processes, any company that can build that sustainability and providing us an acceleration on sustainable practice would win the market as well. And that's what I believe. So I think in general, I strongly believe, I have my own bias, of course, but I strongly believe aquaculture would be playing the most important sustainable protein source over the next 50 years.
I definitely agree on that. And Gibran, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something new. If you like this content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. See you later.